Monday morning, 8:03 a.m. Derek strutted past my desk like he was auditioning for a cologne ad called Entitlement. Same cheap blazer, same smirk, same cologne, probably eau de ego. He dropped his empty coffee cup right onto the edge of my table like I was the damn intern, didn't even look at me. "You'll get that, yeah?" He muttered, already halfway to his standing desk, which he never actually stood at. That's when I knew something in me had snapped. Not exploded, snapped, quiet and final, like the inside of a dry twig right before it catches fire. Now, to be clear, I built this department. 10 years of 5 a.m. start times, spreadsheets thicker than a congressional bill, vendor relationships so tight I could have negotiated world peace if someone slapped a barcode on it. Derek. He was the guy who took credit for my cost-cutting plan by rebranding it as Project Slimline and pitching it with a slide deck full of stock photos of gazelles. A literal gazelle leaping over a canyon. "Agility," he said, pointing like he just solved cold fusion. I stayed quiet like I always did, because the founders trusted me, because the systems ran smooth, because I didn't need a mug with my name on it, I had results. But even I couldn't ignore how Derek had started changing after his executive vision retreat in Scottsdale. Came back with a man bun and started calling meetings syncs. Replaced our monthly performance reviews with something called energy check-ins. Started dropping phrases like "let's get some fresh blood in here" with a wink that could rot drywall. One afternoon, he asked if I felt aligned with the momentum shift, and I swear to God I almost bit my tongue in half just to keep from laughing, or screaming, or both. By the way, if you're even half enjoying this chaos parade of corporate gaslighting and silent revenge, go ahead and tap that subscribe button and hit like. I don't ask for much, but every click tells the algorithm that stories like this are worth telling. And yeah, it keeps the team fed, emotionally, and with tacos. Anyway, back to my charming descent into career purgatory. The worst part wasn't Derek's cheap tactics, or the fact that he pitched my logistics framework at the investor summit without so much as a thank you. No, it was watching him do it badly. He didn't understand what I'd built. He just threw buzzwords at a room full of money and hoped they stuck. Somehow, they did. The founder, Mr. Lansing, had stepped away after a stroke last year, and the board, probably high on TED talks and oat milk lattes, let Derek start calling the shots. Operational shift, they called it, modernization. And somehow, that meant replacing me in meetings with a guy named Connor whose main contribution was asking if our B2B funnel had enough vibe. I stayed, because I still believed in the mission, because I cared about the people, because half the junior staff came to me when Derek's ideas broke something. But mostly, I stayed because I thought if I just worked harder, just one more quarter, one more clean audit, one more record-breaking ROI, they'd see me. Turns out I was invisible by design. 3 weeks before it all blew up, Derek made a comment in the elevator. We were alone. He didn't even look at me. Just said, "I think it's time we brought in some fresh blood." Then he checked his phone and asked if I'd loop in the data from yesterday's meeting. I said sure, and went home and poured a whiskey so strong it could have stripped paint. That night, I opened my old inbox, not the work one, the Gmail I hadn't used since my recruiting days. Inside was a message, 6 months old unread, from Lansing. It just said, "I miss knowing what's really going on." I stared at it for a long time, long enough for the ice in my glass to melt and the buzz to fade. And then I started typing. Not a complaint, not a rant, just the facts. How his systems were being dismantled. How budgets were ballooning. How the team was afraid to speak up because Derek kept replacing dissent with consultants from his fantasy football league. I didn't know if Lansing would reply. I didn't even know if he still could. But I sent it anyway, not out of hope, out of habit, because that's what I do. I build systems, and when they break, I rebuild better, quietly, until the right person finally listens. The invite hit my inbox at 4:07 p.m. on a Friday, like a fart slipped under a locked door. Subject line, urgent HR check-in conference room B. No context, no prep. Just my name, 3 blocks of time, and a quiet suggestion that I pick the soonest available slot. You don't need a psychic or a Harvard MBA to translate that corporate dialect. Someone had their knife out, and they were tired of waiting for my back to turn. I picked the earliest one, 4:30. Figured if the wolves were circling, I might as well walk out with some daylight left. Maybe beat traffic, maybe not throw up in the parking lot. Conference room B was already occupied when I arrived. Derek was seated at the head of the table like he was hosting a game show no one wanted to be on. He didn't even bother with the fake smile. Just tapped his Montblanc pen against a folder and said, "Carol, thanks for making time." Next to him, Gina from HR. Clipboard, neutral expression. Eyes glazed like a woman who spent years deleting souls from payroll. He got right into it, the way cowards do when they've rehearsed their lines all day. The company's at an inflection point, he started. We're pivoting toward a more scalable, agile, youth-forward operational model. And well, your leadership style, while valuable in legacy contexts, doesn't quite fit the forward-facing direction we're headed. That's when I knew he'd practiced those words in the mirror, probably while fixing his hair and whispering affirmations about alpha energy and Q4 dominance. Legacy contexts, like I was a museum exhibit. Not the reason this company didn't collapse under its own bloated startup nonsense 3 years ago. I didn't interrupt. I just watched his mouth move, cataloging every pathetic flourish. Every unfortunately, every not a reflection of your value, every this was not easy. Like hell it wasn't. He looked relieved, like someone just unzipped his guilt and let it fall to the floor. I glanced at Gina. She didn't blink, just slid a packet toward me. Severance details, legalese, NDA, the whole mortuary kit. Then Derek said it, the final insult. We'd appreciate it if you didn't return to your desk. It's already been informed. Someone will collect your personal items and deliver them to your home. Translation: we want you gone before your coworkers realize what just happened. Any questions? He asked, finally meeting my gaze for half a second before darting away like a rat who smelled bleach. I stood up slowly, not because I needed the drama, because my knees had gone numb. I looked at Derek, really looked at him. The freshly whitened teeth, the new Rolex probably leased, lines around his mouth deeper than they were last quarter, and I saw it. He wasn't confident, he was scared. He never expected I'd last as long as I did, never expected I'd keep the wheels turning while he played visionary. And now, with me gone, he'd finally get to break the company in his own image, just like he broke everything else he touched. Thanks for the clarity, I said, voice flat as a dead battery. Then I looked at Gina and added, do I need an escort? Or are we pretending I'm still human for the next 2 minutes? She flinched, just a twitch, but I saw it. Then she stood in motion toward the door. I followed, leaving behind a decade of blood, grit, and grace packaged in one tidy manila envelope. No send-off, no handshake, not even a passive-aggressive cupcake in the break room. When we passed by the bullpen, a few heads popped up. No one said anything. No one needed to. I wasn't the first they'd done this to, but I was the last one who knew where all the wires were buried. Back at my desk, a security guy waited. Didn't say a word, just handed me a sealed cardboard box with my name sharpied across the top. Inside, my backup glasses, a half-dead peace lily, and a mug that read coffee, because murder is illegal. Fitting. On the way out, I passed the display wall, the one with all the department awards, quarterly shout-outs, press clippings. My name wasn't on a single one, but I'd written most of the metrics that earned them. Right before the elevator dinged, I looked back one last time. Derek was watching from the mezzanine, and he couldn't look me in the eye, not even from 40 feet away. The doors closed, and in that quiet metal box, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I smiled, because if he thought that was the end of my story, he hadn't been paying attention. I gave myself one day to rage clean the house, alphabetize my spice rack like it was a military operation, drink too much Cabernet, and rewatch The Devil Wears Prada like it was a documentary on professional trauma. But when the sun rose the next morning and the caffeine hit bloodstream, I wasn't sad. I wasn't broken. I was calculating. The truth is, I'd been living with one foot out the door for months, maybe longer. My body was still showing up to meetings and fixing problems Derek created in his sleep, but my mind, it had already started mapping escape routes. The only thing I hadn't figured out yet was who still remembered why the company had worked in the first place. Who still gave a damn. The answer came to me somewhere between laundry and a revenge-fueled walk around the cul-de-sac. Lansing. Technically, Howard Lansing was still the founder. His name was on the charter, the culture deck, the first patent filing. But after his stroke last year, the board had politely ushered him out of day-to-day operations with phrases like time to focus on your health and transition to an advisory role. Last I heard, he'd retreated to his estate up north, somewhere with more trees than people. Nobody had seen him on a Zoom call since July. Derek called him the ghost in the cap table. But I remembered something Lansing once said to me during a launch crunch, back when the company still ran on sweat, duct tape, and blind optimism. He'd brought me a coffee at 2 a.m. and said, people don't build companies. Patterns do. People just carry them, so I figured I'd remind him of mine. I wrote a short email, nothing dramatic, no complaints, no score settling. Just a quiet thank you for the opportunity, for the challenge, for letting me help shape something real. I said I hoped he was doing well, that I missed the days when this place was about solving hard problems, not selling empty slogans. I didn't expect a reply, but less than 3 hours later I got one. Carol, I remember everything. Can you talk this afternoon? The call was voice only, no cameras. I could hear birds in the background and the clink of what I assumed was a glass of bourbon. His voice was slower than I remembered. Age and illness will do that, but still sharp, still deliberate. He did the pleasantries. He asked about my family, my plans. I gave him the sanitized version. Then came the question, what do you think is happening to my company? I didn't sugarcoat it. I told him about the bloat. The vanity hires, the endless rebranding and vision decks that said nothing but cost everything. I told him about Derek gutting my supply chain system to replace it with a third-party solution that had already failed twice in beta. I told him how the board had stopped listening to data and started chasing LinkedIn virality. I told him the fire was already burning, it just hadn't reached the boardroom curtains yet. He didn't interrupt, just breathed through it. And when I finally stopped to take a sip of water, he said 6 words that changed everything. I've been watching from a distance. There was silence after that, thick, charged. Then he added, I didn't like what I saw. He told me he'd kept access to a few internal dashboards the new execs didn't know about. That he saw the downturns, the churn, the loss of key vendors and talent. He saw how Derek inflated wins and buried losses. how decisions were being made by people who didn't understand the bones of the company they were remodeling. "Why didn't you step in?" I asked, not accusing, just curious. "I wasn't sure who still cared," he said. "Now I am." That line hit me harder than I expected. We talked for 42 minutes. I did most of the talking. He asked questions, good ones, not buzzword bingo, real ones. And at the end, he said this: "I think we need another conversation. Soon, not just you and me." My hands were shaking when I hung up, not from fear, from purpose. Because for the first time since I was escorted out of conference room B, I didn't feel like a casualty. I felt like a chess piece being moved back onto the board. Quietly, strategically, and this time, I wasn't playing defense. I didn't call it a meeting, not officially. Just a coffee catch-up here, a calendar-free Zoom there. People like us, we knew how to move without drawing heat. We were the ones who fixed what broke, patched what cracked, and stayed too long in places that only noticed us when we vanished. And now I was reaching out to them, one by one, like a quiet signal pulsing through the company's old veins. It's time. First was Raj from procurement. He used to call my logistics model beautifully boring, which was the highest compliment in his vocabulary. We met in the back booth of a Thai place across from the old satellite office, the one we used to call the hotbox because the A/C hadn't worked since 2017. He slid into the booth and skipped the pleasantries. "I heard what happened," he said, pushing a spring roll across the table like it was a peace offering. "You good?" "I'm not dead," I said, "just off the payroll for now." He cracked a smile, but his eyes stayed cautious. I leaned in. "I need to know what's really happening. No filters, no decks, just the truth." Raj exhaled hard. "Then you better talk to Jenna in ops and Marcus in finance. And for the love of God, someone needs to check what Derek's doing to the Arcady project." My stomach dropped. Arcady was the thing. The project I'd nurtured like a weird little bonsai tree for 2 years, unsexy, unflashy, but essential. A proprietary logistics optimization tool that had quietly shaved millions off our burn rate. It was supposed to be rolled out company-wide this quarter. "Last I heard," I said slowly, "it was on track." "Not anymore," Raj muttered. "He's blaming it for shipping delays. Says the legacy stack can't scale." "But Carol, it's not Arcady that's broken. It's the patchwork his frat bro consultants glued onto it." I felt something hot coil in my ribs. Blaming legacy systems, the oldest corporate scam in the book. Especially when those legacy systems were the only thing standing between order and chaos. Next was Jenna, director of ops, whose official bio was 2 lines long but who'd been the beating heart of 3 reorgs and 4 product launches. We met in her garage after dark, lights off, cell phones in a Faraday pouch. She wasn't paranoid, she was prepared. "I've been documenting everything," she said, sliding a flash drive across her old workbench. "Timelines, resource bleed, contractor invoices. You won't believe what they're billing under strategic alignment workshops." I plugged the drive into my laptop as soon as I got home. Her data was surgical, time-stamped Slack threads, before and after budget forecasts, onboarding logs for consultants who spent more time posting LinkedIn selfies than writing code. And right there in black and white, Arcady's throughput had dropped 38% in 6 weeks, not because of infrastructure failure, because Derek's people rewrote the core workflow logic without understanding it. Then came Marcus, finance analyst, quiet guy, liked black coffee and terrible fantasy novels. He agreed to a walk-in talk around the reservoir trail. Halfway through, he handed me a folded piece of paper. One number on it, 4.3 M. 4.3 million what? I asked. "In projected revenue erosion," he said, deadpan, "this quarter. Thanks to the changes in logistics and fulfillment." My jaw tightened. "Is the board seeing that?" He shook his head. Derek's team bundled it under expansion transition volatility, buried it deep, but I flagged it in the raw data. I stopped walking, looked out over the water. Something in me clicked, mechanical, precise. That old feeling, when the fog lifts and you see the gears underneath the chaos. "They're gonna burn the whole place down," I whispered. "Unless someone steps in," Marcus replied. "Someone who still knows how the system works." By the end of the week, I had a dossier, not a pitch, not a proposal, a case. Built from raw metrics, backdoor dashboards, operational models, and old emails that painted a crystal clear picture. Derek's vision was a bonfire, and the board was handing him matches. But more than that, I had allies. Not loud ones, not flashy, but the kind that matter when everything starts to fall apart. The ones who don't want credit, just stability, sanity, a place that works. We didn't talk about revenge. We talked about rescue. Because sometimes, only way to save something is to let the people who were ignored lead it back. And somewhere in all that quiet planning, the fire in my chest didn't feel like grief anymore. It felt like fuel. I wrote the strategy doc in the same kitchen where I'd once cried over the company's first product launch, the one where we missed the deadline by 3 days and still somehow delivered the most stable build in the sector. That was back when the company still meant something, back when long nights felt like investment, not exploitation. I'd stood in that exact same spot years ago, surrounded by takeout boxes and bug reports, believing we were building something worth bleeding for. Now it was spreadsheets and silence. But not just any spreadsheets, proof. The kind of proof that doesn't care how smooth your sales pitch is. Forecasts, regression deltas, failure cascades, if you knew how to read between the rows, was all there. The way Derek's consultant army had cannibalized operational cohesion for momentum. how they'd bypassed QA on fulfillment redesigns to chase a demo deadline, and how Arcady, my Arcady, had been Frankensteined into a bloated parody of itself. And I didn't just show what was wrong. I showed how to fix it. I built a 5-phase stabilization plan. No fireworks, no jargon, just timelines, measurable impact, and cross-functional dependencies mapped like a surgeon prepping for heart surgery. I projected cost savings, revenue rebound timelines, vendor confidence recovery. I even drafted leadership transition protocols. Then I ended it with a single, bold line, centered and in bold, "There's still a way out, but not with him." I stared at it for a long time. My finger hovered over delete, but I left it, and I hit send. Lansing responded in under 2 hours. "Meet me Tuesday, off-site, no board, just us. Bring a hard copy, no signature, no further instructions. Just coordinates an old winery upstate that I remembered him mentioning once in passing, back when we used to talk about more than just vendor KPIs. I didn't sleep much that night, because this wasn't just a shot in the dark anymore. It was a line in the sand. If he didn't go for it, if he thought I was just a bitter ex-employee with a vendetta, I'd be done not just at this company, everywhere. Word travels fast when you challenge power with paper cuts and spreadsheets. But if he did believe me, then I just offered him the first real lever he'd seen in over a year. I printed the strategy on heavy stock paper because cheap paper crumples too easily when hands start shaking, and drove 2 hours north to the address he'd sent. The winery looked closed from the road. No signs, no cars, just rolling fields and the faint outline of a barn turned conference hall. He was already there, alone, no assistants, no lawyers. He wore a sweater and jeans, looked 20 pounds lighter, and older in that way men look when they've been watching something they love fall apart from behind a glass wall. He didn't say hello, just gestured toward the bench beside him and nodded toward my folder. "Let's see it." I handed it over and waited as he flipped through each section. No interruptions, no questions. Just the slow sound of pages turning and the occasional twitch of his mouth when he saw something particularly damning, usually accompanied by a muttered curse. At one point, he stopped on the budget table for Q2 projections and tapped the column labeled Systemic Bleed through third-party transition vendors. "Marcus found this?" he asked, eyes still scanning. I nodded. He's been tracking it for months. They buried it under a rollout pivot. Lansing closed the folder, looked out over the hills, then said something I didn't expect. "You could have come to me a year ago." I met his eyes. "I didn't think you were listening anymore." His gaze softened just for a second. "I wasn't, not until now." Then he stood, stretched his back, and said, "All right. I want you to meet someone tomorrow, same place, different room." "Who?" I asked. "Legal," he said, "and someone from my trust." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a conversation anymore. This was a move, a big one. Something was shifting behind the scenes, and if I was reading it right, Lansing hadn't just been watching from a distance. He'd been waiting, and now he was getting back in the game, and he wanted me on the field. The email hit at 9:01 a.m. sharp, like it had been waiting for Monday to flex. Subject line, exciting news, a new chapter in leadership. That was their way of saying, "Don't choke when you see who we picked." The sender was the comms team, but the voice? Oh, it reeked of Derek. Polished, shallow, confident like a toddler in a Batman cape. "We're thrilled to welcome back Derek Vaughn as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately. Derek's dynamic leadership and strategic vision have been instrumental to our growth in the past, and we look forward to this exciting new chapter under his guidance." No mention of the failed product rollout last quarter. Mention of the mass contractor resignations. No mention of Arcady bleeding out on the floor. Just strategic vision and dynamic leadership vomited in 16-point calibri. I stared at it on my phone from the window seat of a quiet train car, heading back from my second meeting with Lansing. The trees blurred past like applause I hadn't earned yet. I didn't feel surprised. I didn't even feel angry, not really. What I felt was older than rage, more surgical. Like someone had taken the last year of my life, distilled it into a bitter shot, and slid it across the bar with a smirk. Then came the second email, not from comms, from Derek himself. Subject line, touch base Monday. Just 3 lines, "Carol, let's reconnect. Be in my office Monday, 10 a.m. Big things ahead." No apology, no explanation. Not even a hint of awareness about the hell he'd put me through. Just an assumption you'll come crawling back. Because that's what people like Derek believe. That power is permanent. That loyalty can be faked. That silence equals surrender. I didn't reply. I didn't even open it a second time. Because while Derek was polishing his throne, I'd been meeting with lawyers who understood exactly how much power Lansing still held through his trust, and how the shares he'd quietly repurchased, bit by bit, year by year, gave him leverage the board didn't even realize they'd sold. I'd seen the paperwork, the kind that doesn't make it into Slack threads, voting clauses, emergency override conditions buried in a rider from 2015. Lansing hadn't just been watching. He'd been arming up, and me, I was his proposal. His plan, the answer to a question no one else even realized was about to be asked. But Derek, he still thought I was a mid-level casualty, good soldier who'd gotten realigned and needed a pat on the head to come back into the fold. He thought I'd sit in that office, listen to his pitch, and thank him for the opportunity. Maybe even cry a little. And honestly, a small part of me wanted to show up. just to see his face when he realized I wasn't the one who needed the meeting. But I didn't, because I had better things to do. Like reviewing the draft transition plan Lansing's legal team had prepared. Like quietly syncing with the 2 board members who hadn't voted for Derek's return and were now experiencing a sudden outbreak of buyer's remorse. Like preparing the remarks Lansing hinted I might be making if things moved fast, and they were moving fast. By Thursday, I got a text from Lansing's lawyer. Board session locked for next week. NDA until then. Carol, be ready. That was it. No flowery speeches. No we're so grateful nonsense. Just be ready. So when Monday rolled around and 10 a.m. hit, Derek was sitting in his office alone. Probably with that smug half-smile, adjusting his tie, waiting for a knock that never came. And somewhere the thought must have crept in, quiet and cold as a drip in a basement sink. What if she knows something I don't? Because I did. And soon, everyone would. We met in a private room above an old bookstore Lansing owned through a shell company, because of course he did. A kind of place with leather chairs that creaked under real weight, and shelves full of dusty hardcovers no one dared move, like the room was some cathedral to forgotten knowledge. Lansing was already seated, reading a yellowing copy of The Innovator's Dilemma like it was prophecy. His lawyer stood nearby, gray suit, no smile, fingers twitching near a fountain pen like it was a trigger. They didn't offer me coffee, just a thick manila folder and a single line from Lansing. This is what I want. The board just has to say yes. I opened it. The top page was a formal offer, Chief Executive Officer, full authority over operational restructuring, tied compensation to performance benchmarks I'd helped define 2 years ago. It wasn't generous, it was accurate, like someone had finally measured me with the right scale. Underneath that, a transition roadmap, already signed by Lansing. Legal work showing ownership thresholds through his trust. The last page was a summary of the board's voting rights, with certain legacy clauses highlighted in red. I recognized them immediately, clauses no one had mentioned in years. Clauses written back when the company was still 10 people in a loft above a bakery, and I was the one keeping the whole thing from tipping into chaos. Lansing leaned back. I never sold my soul, Carol, just leased it. Quietly bought most of it back before anyone noticed. And now, if the board approves this, I'm activating what's left. His lawyer finally spoke. You'll need to be quiet until the vote. No signals, no leaks, of course, I said. I didn't post on LinkedIn, didn't change my job title to advisor or strategic consultant, didn't share any vague quotes about new beginnings or full circle moments. I kept my head down, because I knew this wasn't the kind of victory that's celebrated early. This was a knife that had to slide between the ribs clean. Meanwhile, Derek was doing his one-man press tour like a rooster that mistook the sunrise for applause. He did a live webinar on leading through disruption, where he actually used the phrase, "We're not just pivoting, we're pirouetting." He posted a selfie from the office rooftop, with the caption, "The future looks bright," and a hashtag that made me physically recoil, #VisionVaughn. The company's comms team pushed out internal memos full of confetti and meaningless stats. Engagement is up 12%. One read. Never mind that half the engineers were either job hunting or straight-up ghosting sprint planning meetings. Derek held a town hall where he used 3 sports metaphors, 2 startup cliches, and 1 thinly veiled jab at legacy-era inefficiencies. I watched every minute, smiled at none of it, because I knew what was coming. The shares Lansing had reacquired over the years were held in a trust controlled by his family office. Legally distant enough to avoid scrutiny, but close enough to vote. When combined with 2 board members he'd quietly been nurturing, one of whom I had looped into early Arcady design sessions years ago, we were within striking distance. Vote was scheduled for Tuesday. Until then, silence, stillness. Derek kept throwing sparks into the wind, thinking he was building a fire. He didn't know the smoke was already rising, just not his, and I was holding the match. The invite hit inboxes late Sunday night, the kind of after-hours corporate ping designed to feel urgent, important, like it carried the weight of destiny. Town hall event Monday 10 a.m. New chapter ahead. No details, no agenda. Just the company name in bold, followed by the names of 2 people, Derek Vaughn and Howard Lansing. Internally, the company buzzed. Slack lit up with nervous emojis and wild guesses. Some thought Derek was announcing a new acquisition. Others guessed a product relaunch. A few whispered IPO prep, which was laughable considering the platform was still coughing up user reports with corrupted timestamps. I didn't say a word. At 9:20, Derek arrived through the employee entrance, flanked by his 2 favorite yes men, one holding a tablet, the other carrying a branded water bottle like it was an Olympic torch. Derek wore his power uniform, tailored navy blazer, open collar, no tie, Rolex glinting like it knew secrets. He made a grand gesture of waving to the AV team, asking for a mic check even though they hadn't set one up yet. "Big day," he said, loud enough for the interns to hear. "Time to inspire the troops." Backstage he preened, smoothed his hair, practiced lines in the reflection of a dark monitor. "Let's align our momentum. This is more than growth, it's evolution." He paused once to scroll through his phone, checking messages. Nothing from me. He frowned for a second, then shrugged. "Irrelevant. He stepped toward the curtain, nodded to the event coordinator, and prepared to bask. That's when he saw the extra chairs, 3 of them, set neatly on the far side of the stage, more than the 2 names announced. He leaned toward the AV tech and asked, "Who else is presenting?" The kid looked up. "Ooh, it's on the slide deck, sir." Derek blinked. "There's a slide deck?" The AV kid nodded and clicked forward. The screen behind the stage lit up. A title card appeared, Strategic Transition and Operational Stabilization Initiative. Beneath it, 3 names: Howard Lansing, Carol Whitaker, in partnership with the Lansing Family Trust. Derek stared at the screen for a full 5 seconds before turning to his assistant. "Was this updated this morning?" I thought this was yours," the assistant stammered, eyes darting to the clipboard. "You sent a new version last night." "I sent a placeholder. This isn't mine." The intern scurried off. Derek stood frozen. Then the room lights dimmed. The crowd began to shuffle in, employees, stakeholders, department heads, even a few unfamiliar suits from the board. A camera crew appeared in the corner. Someone handed Derek a mic. "You're up first." He nodded automatically, but his rhythm was off now. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. The script in his head, gone, replaced with the quiet echo of those 3 names. The empty inbox, the chairs he wasn't prepared for. As he walked out onto the stage, the applause came, light, polite, professional. Not the thunder he expected. From the wings. I stood behind the curtain with Lansing, calm and composed. I held a slim folder in one hand and a thumb drive in the other. Lansing nodded at me without looking away from the crowd. "He doesn't know yet, does he?" "No," I said, "but he's starting to smell the smoke." The first slide appeared on the main screen behind Derek. It wasn't his logo. It wasn't his tagline. It was the schematic for Arcadis' original framework, mine, clean, unaltered, annotated with a single line of text at the bottom. "Stability isn't legacy, it's design." Derek swallowed once, then tried to start his speech. And that's when the room really began to shift, because Derek didn't know it yet, but the curtain was already halfway down. He just hadn't heard the ropes pulling. Derek's voice cracked halfway through the second slide. He tried to laugh it off, some awkward, half-swallowed joke about old files getting mixed in, but the room didn't bite. No chuckles, no nods, just rows of quiet, seated employees watching him sweat under soft lights. Even the board members weren't faking interest anymore. I could see 2 of them from the wings, arms folded, lips pressed thin. One leaned toward the other and muttered something. I didn't need to hear it to know the gist. Derek kept tapping the clicker, but nothing happened. The screen remained frozen on Arcadis' system map, annotated in my handwriting. He turned toward the AV booth and waved, too sharp, too desperate. "Can we move forward?" This isn't the deck eye, the house lights cut slightly. A soft spotlight lit the opposite side of the stage. A second set of footsteps echoed across the floor. Howard Lansing entered from stage left, cane tapping, face unreadable, dressed not in a business suit, but a wool blazer and jeans. The kind of man who'd built something once and still remembered what it cost. Applause started slow. Someone in the back, then another. Then a wave, not raucous, not forced, just solid, real, and beside him, walking in step, was me. I wore no badge, no lanyard, no title, just a binder, thick, black, and clearly labeled, Transition Operations, Phase 1 to 3, tucked under my left arm like it belonged there, because it did. Derek turned. The moment he saw us, his body locked like a folding chair mid-collapse. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked to the board, then back to the AV booth. Nothing saved him. Lansing took the mic from the stand without ceremony, didn't need an introduction, didn't wait for silence. Just started talking in that calm, gravel-rich voice that somehow reached every corner of the room. "I want to thank you all for coming today. I know the last year has been confusing, flashy, loud. You've been told a lot of stories about where this company is going." He paused, glanced at Derek, then back to the crowd. "But I've been watching. Not from far, not from silence, just quietly. And I've realized something very simple. The future doesn't belong to the people who make the most noise." He turned to me, held out his hand. "The future belongs to the ones who do the work." I stepped forward, placed the binder down on the table behind us, took his hand in mine. "And starting today, Lansing continued, your CEO. Person who will lead this company forward, not with slogans, but with systems, is Carol Whitaker." The room stood, not all at once, not choreographed. Just this slow, swelling rise, like the air got heavier and their bodies needed to respect gravity again, like something solid had finally landed. Derek didn't clap. He didn't move. He reached into his pocket, fumbling for his phone like it was a life raft, but his hand shook. The phone slipped, hit the stage floor with a loud, pathetic crack. He bent to pick it up and knocked over his own water in the process. Nobody helped. Lansing stepped back, letting the moment breathe. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I didn't wave like a politician or perform like a startup unicorn. I just nodded once, because this wasn't a victory parade. It was a transfer. Power, real power, doesn't scream. It walks on stage, holds out a hand, and rewrites the ending. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit him.